والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله أكبر ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. Glory be to Allah, all praise to Allah. There is no God but Allah. Allah is great.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to the series True Peace, the Secret of Life. A look into the world's fastest growing religion and most sustainable belief system in the entire universe. In this series, we've been looking at different facets or different petals that make up Islam. Islam is not just a two-dimensional religion. It is made up of many different dimensions, many different facets. Every time you look, you find more and more that Islam has to offer the whole of society, the whole of mankind, and helps you to get closeness to Allah. It's not just a theoretical religion, somewhere far off that doesn't have personal meaning to you in your own life right now. It is a religion that deals with how to be effective in all sorts of ways. And last week we dealt with the results of prayer. Why do we pray? Why perform our salah? And we looked at prayer and the results of prayer on the soul, how it brings closeness to Allah, how it renews our agreements that we've made with Allah, how it gives meaning and clarity and purity to life, how it builds up an atmosphere of piety and morality and brotherhood of the ummah in the communities that you come from. So true peace and the secret of life are found through many different avenues within Islam. And today, inshallah, we're going to be looking at zakat. Zakat is giving a tax or giving charity. So the focus of the life of all submitters, us as Muslims, or anyone who freely chooses to submit their life to Allah, has to understand that the focus of life has to be to give what Allah asks us to do to mankind and to Him. Whatever Allah asks us to give, we need to give. If He asks us to give ourselves freely, we must do that. If He asks us to pray, we must do that. If He asks us to fast during the month of Ramadan, we must do that. And so when He says that we must give zakat, we must do that. Now, there are many ways that we can worship in this world that He has given us to live in. We can worship economically, we can worship spiritually, and we can worship physically. There are three ways that Allah expects us to worship. If we look at Christianity and other religions in the world, we'll see that they only have worship in one way. You have to worship by praying. But in Islam, worship is different. In fact, worship is something that is done 24 hours a day. It's not only in standing with our hands raised up that is accepted as worship. Worship is when we teach somebody something, when we remove an obstacle that can harm that person, when we warn people of a danger, when we worship physically by doing the physical actions that we do in our worship, when we look after the environment. These are different ways that we as Muslims worship. So worship is more than just one dimension in Islam. Worship can also be done through economic worship. And what does that mean? Economic worship is the way that we deal with our resources, the way we deal with our wealth, and the way we apply our wealth in our day-to-day living. Physical worship, as we've already dealt with before, is the way we use what Allah has given us, the way we use our body, the way we use our intellect, the way we use the faculties that we have been given. So the result is the one will give us spiritual growth, and the way we deal with our economic worship and the way it is accepted from us will give us spiritual growth. So physical worship gives us spiritual growth, and economic worship gives us physical growth. So Islam, it's a very, very practical religion. In fact, it says in the Quran, the two most important demands for success is the following. It says, "This is the book. It is guidance sure, without doubt, to those who fear Allah, who believe in the unseen, and perform their salah. and spend out of what we have provided for them, zakat. Alhamdulillah, these are the two things that have been stressed, that prayer and zakat need to go hand in hand with each other. Now, one of the dangers that we find in this world today that we live in is that people live extravagantly, live beyond their means. We live in a society of people in debt. They owe money to the banks because they went and loaned money. They went and did things that are not permissible in Islam. And some people who have too much wealth and still live beyond their means. They live extravagant lives. And this, of course, Shaitan is very, very pleased with. He's happy when people live beyond their means or live extravagant lives. Then he knows that they are not doing the things that they are supposed to, and they're not getting the reward from economic worship. We're worshipping the way that Allah has ordained for them. Wealth can be the mother of all evils. Wealth can be something that actually prevents us from entering paradise. It is the basis of many people moving away from truth. Many people prefer wealth to following Allah or being guided by Allah. Some people prefer to worship food. Some people prefer to worship clothing. Some people are so distracted by the affairs of this world that food and clothing are their gods. Some people, it is their accommodation, their houses, their hotel rooms, their jet-setting lifestyles that are more important to them. To be seen in the right places, to be seen having the right property and living in the right area. That is more important to them than what Islam teaches, or paying zakat, or praying, or hajj, or fasting. Some people, it is having their desires of their flesh gratified, whether it be drugs, whether it be alcohol, whether it be sexual relations. These are things that are far more important to them. If there's a choice between fasting or giving into their desires of their flesh, they choose the desires of their flesh. Perhaps you're listening now and you go, yeah, well, that's what I'm like. How do I deal with that? The way you deal with it is by following the simple legislation that Allah has given to you to cleanse your wealth. It's a form of worship. Just like it's important for you to do physical worship, just like it's important for you to feed your soul, it's also important for you to cleanse your money. Please, I can see some of you already getting worried. Some people say, but you sound like the Christians now. Give your 10%, give your money, give your money, give your money. And you know what the church does with your money? That's not what we are saying. You need to understand this. This is zakat we're talking about. It's not profit making. It's not making money out of people because of their silly beliefs. And some guy who says, if you raise your hands up now, gold will fall out of the sky. And if you look under your chair, you'll find a ruby or you'll find a diamond. This is tricks. This is magic. This is not Islam. This is not what we have in Islam. Islam has none of these tricks. Zakat is different. You hear in Christianity when they talk about giving tithing, all these name it, claim it, and frame it churches that con and lie to their people by telling them that if they look under their seat, you'll see the wealth that God has given you because you gave 10% to the church. And the people look under their chairs and they find gold dust and nonsense like this. This is nothing like zakat. Zakat is when you are rewarded for giving charity for yourself. You take that money and you distribute it yourself. You take that money and you give it to the poor. You give it to those in need. You don't give it to the church. You give it to the person that you see that you think is most deserving. Perhaps you're watching and you know an organization that needs help or support, and you support that. That's a way of cleansing your money as well. Perhaps you see Peace TV and you give it to them to continue the message, but you are doing it. You're not trusting some priest with your money who's taking most of that money and using it for himself. So the rewards of charity is that you will see a large amount of growth in your own business, in your own community, in your own life. Not that we are trying to say that in some way that if you give money, it's an investment like you have, a pyramid scheme. It's the right thing to do. It's charity. It's not giving it to some corrupt organization or some corrupt group. When you give zakat, it is a divine mercy. It is a mercy for you to give to other people, to help other people. Imagine a society, if every single Muslim actually paid their zakat, we wouldn't have the poor. You know, right now I am in India, and I walk through the streets and I see many, many poor people. In South Africa, where I live, there are many, many poor people. In fact, all over the world there are many poor people. Maybe we don't always see them, but there are poor people all over. If everyone gave their zakat, we would not see these poor people. One of the nice things about giving charity, when it's done with the right intention, with the right motive and the right heart, not because we are forced to do it, not because somehow we feel that everyone will notice if we do it, but when we do it, we find that we don't live in fear anymore. There's a fear that is removed from us because we know that Allah will be pleased with what we have done. There's a calmness that comes over us. Giving zakat is a way for us to paradise. It's a way for us to get to heaven. It's not that we're buying a ticket into heaven, but it is a way. It's not the only way, but it's a way to paradise. We want to do everything that would be pleasing to Allah. And by giving zakat, that is one of the ways that would be pleasing to Allah. When we give zakat, we cleanse our wealth and we gain protection over our wealth. It's a way of purifying our wealth. When we give our zakat, when we pay our zakat, it's like barakah comes into our money. We see that the money actually goes further. You know, when somebody holds back money, they hardly got any money. And so when we give money out, when we distribute wealth, we find that that wealth, it becomes more out of less. I remember so many times where my wallet had hardly any money, and yet when I gave wealth out of that, that barakah stayed in that money that I had. And so there's more reward in it. We seem to be carefuler with our money. Well, it's time for us to take a break, and when we get back from the break, we will continue, inshallah.
All praise to Allah.
An evil is approaching. A gap has appeared in the barrier of Ya'juj and Ma'juj, like this. This is part of a hadith that was spoken over 1400 years ago. And if it was near then, imagine how near it is now. My name is Muhammad Tim Humble, and in this series we explore the hadith of Sahih Muslim that speak of the trials and tribulations that are to come in the end of days.
Know and understand the signs of the final day to increase your taqwa and protect your iman in end of days. Next on Peace TV.
All praise to Allah.
Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. We have been speaking about zakat in today's show and how we can gain benefits by giving zakat. Benefits that you can get simply by giving zakat. I mean, there's so many ways that we can purify ourselves, how we can get closer to Allah. And one of the ways is simply by distributing to the poor, giving to the poor and helping those in need. But there's also a punishment for those who want to hold on to wealth, who refuse to give to the poor, who refuse to look after those who are in need and do not want to give their zakat. And there is a punishment for those people, not only in this life, but in the life hereafter. You see their lives are in ruin. You see that the hellfire is lapping at their feet, if you want to look at it in that way. You see that they're getting further and further away from Islam. You see these people having problems in their day-to-day lives. Their wealth becomes a burden around their neck. They live in fear the whole time. And you eventually find their businesses collapsing. You find there's the decrease in wealth. Even though they might have a lot of money, they seem to keep spending money, what they say, putting money behind money, throwing money after money. And there's no barakah in their money. And their investments just don't seem to pan through whenever they put things together. So let's cleanse our wealth. Remember, this is not Christianity we're talking about, this is Islam. You're giving it to who you want to give it to. You are the person who decides who you want to give that money to. You make that decision. You are not giving it to the church to deal with. You're not giving it to the Vatican City. You are distributing it out of your own free will, with no one else knowing where you're giving it to, no one else knowing if you gave the right amount or not. You are doing it properly. please calculate it properly. Most of the cities, the countries that you come from, have Jama'at ulamas. You have many councils around. You have many people that will give you calculations how to work out your zakat distribution correctly. Some people try to hide their zakat money by transferring things from gold into diamonds. You can't crook Allah. Allah knows what you're doing. So don't try to deceive Allah. You're only deceiving yourself when you think you can fool Allah. So the effects of giving zakat on your soul are tremendous. Remember we spoke about the effects of prayer on your soul and performing your salah on your soul. Now the effects of giving zakat on your soul also very, very big. They remove the love for money. When you distribute your wealth, you no longer think of money as a god. You start realizing that money is just a means, and so you start to remove the love of money. You start to have a more pure heart because you have a desire to see people gain more. You see people who are poor and you cannot walk away from that person and say, well, he deserves what he has. He deserves what he's got. No, you see that person and your heart breaks. You think, how can I not help that person? So you find a purification of your heart. You find a peace of mind comes over you. You're not worrying about money, 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 money all the time. You start thinking about how I can use that vessel to help those around me. You become more mindful that Allah is the owner of everything, that the money that you may have in your possession is a trust from Allah, and it actually does not belong to you, it belongs to Allah. If you're giving wealth to people, and if the whole Muslim community actually gave wealth properly, one of the effects of zakat on your community is that you will find that there is less violence in your community, and you'll find that the crime rate in your community will drop drastically. You won't find crime and you won't find violence as we see in societies where people do not give zakat. Because if you give zakat, there'll be no need for someone to rob your house or break into your house, because you'll bring the standard of living up in your community. It promotes social responsibility and social welfare if it is done properly. Be very cautious who you give your zakat money to. Give your zakat money to those people who you trust and believe will distribute it correctly. Now, the next point that we'd like to deal with in this series is looking at fasting. We're going through the 5 pillars of Islam. So the next pillar that we're going to go through, and how to purify your soul, how to cleanse your soul, how to grow with your soul and find true happiness. And the next point that we need to get through to as quickly as we can in the series, not with this rushing ahead without doing it in detail, but we need to move on because there's a lot to cover. And that is the importance of fasting. You know, fasting has become such a big question in today's society, especially amongst the youth. The youth say, well, we don't really want to fast anymore in the month of Ramadan. And you find that during Ramadan, the first week of Ramadan, the mosque is full. Second week, the numbers start getting less. Third week, there's hardly anybody in the mosque. And the last week again, of course, it gets full again. How can we be constant in fasting during the month of Ramadan, going to mosque on time and doing all these things? The importance of fasting is that it gives us entry or the keys to paradise. It helps us to move towards paradise. It's not going to give us free entry into paradise, but it gives us the keys to go towards paradise. We still have to find the lock. We still have many other things that we need to do, but it's one of the steps that leads us on the way to paradise. It's very, very important that we understand that fasting has an effect on our soul, on our spirituality. It helps us to those people who train to have self-restraint. When we fast, it trains us to have self-restraint. We learn to have to restrain ourselves from eating. We restrain ourselves from drinking. And this has an effect on our soul. If we can fast from food and we can fast from drinking, then we can also fast from doing haram things in our lives. We can fast from going on the internet and looking at things that we shouldn't look at. It will help us to restrain ourselves from watching programs that we shouldn't watch. It will restrain ourselves from saying horrible things about people. It will help us from having an understanding that we are all one ummah. So this is the effects of simply fasting. It trains the soul in many other avenues as well. It gives us preparation for obedience to Allah. If we're able to be obedient in small things, Allah will help us and give us the strength to be obedient with bigger things. If we are able to get it right with small things like fasting during the month of Ramadan, Allah can trust us with bigger things like spreading the message of Islam to other people. So if we can be trusted with small things, Allah will trust us with greater things. What an honor, what a privilege it is that we as Muslims have the opportunity to fast during the month of Ramadan. Allah allows us this privilege of being able to pass small tests so that He can give us bigger things to do in this life. It gives us closeness to Allah. During the month of Ramadan, we're thinking about Allah. It's not about how much food that we can make after we break our fast, or how many activities we can do in the mosque, or how many guest speakers we can have to come and speak in the mosque. No, it's about bringing people closer to Allah. Sometimes, and please understand, this is coming from a place where I feel that we need to get the spirit of Ramadan back. I'm not criticizing this. If you have this happening in your mosque, congratulations, it's good for you to do this. But I'm saying sometimes we need to be careful that we don't do this too much. Sometimes during Ramadan it becomes a time of getting guest speakers and getting the greatest scholars to come to our community to give series of talks, and we're forgetting the spirit of Ramadan. It's about you connecting with Allah. Don't have it just about entertainment. Sometimes during Ramadan it becomes an entertainment month, a month of entertainment, something to keep busy for the entire month so that everybody will come. No, yes, it's fine to do those things, but let us not forget that it's about you committing to Allah during the month of Ramadan, during our fast. It's how close we can get to Allah. Do not be distracted. Do not get involved with all the peripheral things about Ramadan, all the external things about Ramadan, and forget the spirit of Ramadan itself. And that is that we are supposed to be getting closer to Allah. So fasting brings closeness to Allah. It brings an atmosphere of piety. It brings an atmosphere of purity. And it brings an atmosphere of unity, because the whole Muslim Ummah throughout the world are all fasting at the same time. We unite, we stand together as one brotherhood, one Ummah, and then we cleanse our souls, we purify our souls, we unite our souls, and we remember what Islam is actually all about. The next thing we have to get through, and I don't think we're going to manage before this program ends today, but inshallah we'll try, is Hajj. One of the most important things for every Muslim to do, that we must go on Hajj if we have the means, if we have the ability. We need to be people who are desiring to go on Hajj, have a thirst and a hunger to go on Hajj. Concentrate on what the virtues of Hajj are, the effects of Hajj on your soul. It reminds you that there is a day of recompense, a day of judgment. When you go on Hajj, you understand what it's all about. It helps you to complete your Islam. Your Islam is now completed once you have done it. You put the 5 pillars of Islam into perspective. You complete your submission to Allah when you go on Hajj. It helps you to put into perspective exactly how lowly Shaitan is and how he is trying as hard as he can to destroy your Iman. When you go on Hajj, you understand it totally, and you get this understanding into perspective, and you realize that Allah is more powerful than anything Shaitan can throw your way. Everything becomes more real to you, and everything becomes more sincere to you when you go on Hajj. When you go on Hajj, you prepare to sacrifice yourself from time, from sleep, from needs, from requirements, and you give yourself, you commit yourself. And this has an effect on your soul that helps you in your day-to-day life as you go on further in the life that you have. So the purpose of these types of worship help you to pray better, to remember Allah. When you give zakat, it helps you to purify your heart and your love of money. When you fast during the month of Ramadan, it helps you to fear and understand that you need to be obedient to Allah. When you go on Hajj, it helps you to understand all the pillars of Allah, that you're a united Ummah, and that you need to be one solid unit of people working together as one Ummah. Well, that's all the time we have for today's program. Inshallah, next time we'll continue on how you can be successful in Islam and how you can have true peace of mind as a Muslim. So until next time, from me, Areeb Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Subhanallah.